white zone is for immediate...
Wait a minute. Have you heard?
This is a show to keep you on the edge of your seat.
Citizens of America,
Welcome to the Radiocast.
All right, welcome to Radiocast. This week we are analyzing two different Superman shows. We are going to be talking about the Fleischer Studios Superman cartoons from the 1940s, and followed up by the live-action Superman of the 1950s. We have one episode that made the public domain there. So, joining us, we have Jack Kelleher, we have Joe Taft, and we have Carreiro.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so reason I picked this show, I actually kind of grew up with it. Back in 1997, Cartoon Network had a show called Cartoon Roulette. It was basically like, here's a bunch of random junk from the 60s, like the original Space Ghost, the original Birdman, before all the fun Adult Swim versions of them. But then they also had this old Superman in it, and it just felt like, oh, this is quality. Like, it just felt like, especially compared to the cheap animation of the 1960s, like, oh, yeah, there was effort put into this. And, you know, I'd be tuning into it because immediately after Dragon Ball Z would be on. So, just like, when I started doing research on what's in there, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I actually vividly remember watching this as a kid and really liked it. So, how about you guys? What did you think of the Fleischer shorts?
I liked them. They were cartoons that I'd seen like moments here and there of them, but never watched them in their entirety, but I was aware of them. Yeah, that's all I got to say.
Yeah, I agree. Same thing for me. I've seen clips like on social media and stuff of these cartoons, but I hadn't seen a full episode, and I think it's funny that you had prior experience in the Dragon Ball Z. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I thought the animation was like really strong for the 1950s. I mean, I thought everything looked, maybe not everything, but it looked really good. The way that Superman moved around and the way that the villains like would do their thing, and there was a lot of fire and explosions and big things in like the finales of these episodes. Mm-hmm. And I think they all looked really good. So that's one of the things I wanted to mention right off the gate, that looks really good for a show for the 1950s, in my opinion.
The first one actually came out in 1941. It's actually the 40s.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. Yeah. And then George Reeves was
that was the 50s. Yeah,
Thank you.
Adventures of Superman.
Thank you.
Yeah, some backstory on the quality of the animation is the Fleischer Brothers studio was a really big animated studio started in 1929 by the brothers. And like the 30s, they were kind of like the biggest like animation studio. They were like outclassing a Disney in the 1930s. Wow. And they're famous because characters like Popeye, a Betty Boop, a Bimbo, they're the ones who created those first cartoons. Like, they created those characters. And when they were approached about doing these Superman cartoons, they were at first hesitant because it would require them to do like more realistic looking animation, which wasn't really their thing. So they kind of tried to get out of it by asking Paramount Pictures, who was their parent company, for $100,000 a budget for every short, which in today's standards would be like $1.43 million per short. They thought that Paramount would see that number and be like, no, and then move on and then find someone else to do it. But Paramount called their bluff and instead gave them $50,000 for every short, which at the time, and actually in today's money, it's the biggest budgeted animated short, because they would be spending like $50,000 for like these 10-minute shorts.
Yeah, not long.
So even by today's standards, it's the biggest budgeted animated series ever.
Yeah, what is like the price per minute? You know what I'm saying? When you break it down, per second. But Adam, what did you say?
And I remember they put these shorts in front of, so I can't remember what movies, but they would put them in front of movies. So you would watch even when you got like the VHS version, you would watch like the short right before going into the movie too.
Oh.
So I think it must have been, since Paramount owned it, it must have been a Paramount Pictures movie. But they kind of like, if you look at now, like some of the cartoons that come up for superheroes, like this was the first one that really started. It was shorts, but kind of started comic books instead of just being read, being shown animated and shown in films.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read that this was like the first time a superhero animation had ever been done, and actually I read kind of a lot of interesting facts on like how these shorts, how they influenced even the character of Superman himself, because in the comics, when the Superman comics first came out, Superman actually didn't fly. He leapt great distances, which was say like he could leap taller than a building. Mm-hmm. When they were animating the show, they said that him trying to animate him leaping just looked very silly. So they asked DC Comics, which at the time was called Action Comics.
Yeah.
They were like, "Hey, how about we just have him fly instead?" And they were like, "Sure." And that's how Superman got arguably his most famous power, was because of these shorts.
Wow.
And these were also the first time like fast. Like a look up in the bird is a look up in the sky is a bird, is a plane. That was the first time I think that had been ever done with the Superman character, was these shorts as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd have to go back into some of those OG comics by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the creators of Superman. Mm-hmm. But it is very interesting because he was pretty much still in his infancy, a lot of those characters, and like to bring it over to animation, and not in a cheap way. You know, they really like they were like, this is gonna be something. Like we have, the Calling of the Bluff. I found that quite funny because they're like, no, you're not getting off that easy. Like this is gonna be something. And but yeah, overall, the budget speaks for itself. I think it's a fun show, and I'm excited to get into the specifics of it. But I want to ask you guys real quick, what are our thoughts on this suit, the Superman suit in this show? What do you think of the suit? You like it? Don't like it?
I didn't really notice it being any different than any of the other Superman suits. Or was it something you noticed?
I just enjoyed like the well, usually I'm not a big trunks guy, but the trunks weren't really bothering me. And also I'm not as big on like the symbol, the crest being on the cape. I know that's not always there, but we saw that in the George Reeves, sorry. And I liked the color scheme, like the way that the blue and the red popped together. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, the logo on the cape.
That too.
It goes cool. It goes in and out. Like not everybody uses it, but like the TV series, what is it? Lois and Clark. He had it on the cape.
Yep, and so did Chris Reeve.
Yeah, Chris
as well.
Reeves had it. So that's one thing I don't know the exact origin on, but that comes and goes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think. I don't think Henry Cavill Superman had the logo on his cape.
The last batch coming out, like the adaptations of Superman hasn't had that. But with this animated series, you also got a chance to really see other characters more. So you saw more of Lois Lane and her showcasing how strong she should be. How strong she is, even though it's very out of the ordinary reporter jumping up to do a story, and she jumps in a plane and starts flying. You didn't know anybody from the Boston Globe could fly a plane to cover a story.
She went crazy in that episode.
Yeah. I kind of do want to touch upon the character of Lois Lane, because I know before you mentioned, you said that except for one thing, you thought this show had aged well. Throughout this, every episode I watched, I was just always thinking man, Lois is an idiot. Throughout this show,
yeah, she made some
throughout this
moves.
show, every episode she repeatedly does I know the role of Lois Lane, she's supposed to be the damsel in distress. She's supposed to go. She ends up in danger. Superman flies in and saves her. But after episode, because I watched them pretty much all at once. After episode 5, I was okay, like Lois, like you really need to stop and think about what you're doing. Like
There's
this
a
is
trend
like,
forming.
like this is like the 5th time you've been kidnapped and tied to a chair. Like
8 out of 9
like,
episodes.
Stop doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely no character development between episodes.
Yeah, like
No.
she did not learn any lesson.
No, and I don't really like so much character development too. Like every time they bring that character in to do, it's always like either she's not like playing the naive and getting sucked into things, or she's like gun ho. It's like, no, I'm doing this. I am Lois Lane, and then she gets stuck because she's so gun ho. It's like depending on which adaptation they take it, it's like they directed her. Like if you watch the movies with Christopher Reeve, Lois Lane was always that reporter that's like, oh, I'm just gonna get a story. How did I get here?
Yeah, more damsel than like investigative journalist who is going into the thick of it to like figure out what's going on, because like she's almost like on like she's like almost like a detective in a lot of this. Like she's going out of her way. She's like not doing what Perry, the chief, like tells her to do. She's not doing what Superman tells her to do. She's doing what she wants to do. And I like that as her character, but she's also like I could tell like she knows that Superman's gonna come save her pretty much every time. She's not saying it, but she knows. And that was especially clear in the Adventures of Superman episode where she got what was his name? Blinky? When Blinky, kidnapped her. That we'll get into in a little while, but especially in the maybe less in the cartoon. But she definitely had a sense of like, yeah, Superman's gonna come save me, because every single episode, there's a trend. She pretty much leads him to the bad guys.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, like she does a lot of the heavy lifting. And to be honest, I feel like Clark, his entire personality in this show is like, ha ha ha, I'm actually Superman and no one knows.
Well,
Like, which is fine. I just feel like for the most part, it's like Superman comes in, saves the day. Lois is the one that gets them there. Like it's like a vessel of, it's a 10-minute episode every time. So there's a pattern,
Yeah, and with Clark Kent, that's like another angle. Like you got more in depth to see through these animated series, like his own personality, why he's just not a disguise. There is something else behind it.
Yeah, I feel you.
yeah, speaking of Clark Kent and this show's influence Superman, in one of the episodes, I believe it was the Mechanical Monsters, we saw for the first time Clark Kent getting into a phone booth and coming out in the Superman outfit. That's something
It's iconic,
I'm pretty sure in every it was in the Christopher Reeve movies. It's been done in like comic books and other animated shows.
Yeah.
And this was the first time to do that. First time he ever did it was in this show. So it kind of did set a lot of like the tropes that would be seen in future Superman.
I thought it was funny how it took him longer to get changed than it took George Reeves to get changed, because they cut back to Lois, and that one cut to Lois, cut back, and he's already in the suit. But like with the animated, they show him the silhouette, like putting it on and stuff, which I thought was cool. Yeah, it is funny. And then like it just reminded me of the Deadpool scene when he's like trying to get changed in there. That's crazy, Very, very funny. Yeah.
So, it was 9 episodes in the Fleischer era. Was there one that stood out to any of you as a favorite of what you saw?
I would need to think about that, actually. I really liked $1 Billion Limited, because it was just a literal train ride of an episode. Like, Lois gets on that train, and then it's just action the whole way through. So it was enjoyable, and I liked the way the Superman handled the issue in that one. But I also wanted to mention, I'll let you guys answer that, but then I do want to mention something about the origins of Superman and episode 1 after. So which episodes do you guys like?
I kind of like the ones that, because I think more than half of them is about Superman stopping a mad scientist. So kind of,
dude.
So kind of the ones that didn't involve a mad scientist, but other things, kind of the ones that stood out a bit more to me as being a bit more unique. Like you said, like the train one, where it's like these like criminals in like a superpowered car trying to rob a train.
Yeah, that car was hella fast. It was so fast.
And then there's like the one with I think it was called the Bulleteers.
The Bulleteers, yeah. That
and
one
they
was
had
fun
like
too.
this flying sort of plane cars like smashing through buildings, and then there were the ones I call like the Superman versus Godzilla episode.
That's what I called it
and the
too.
Superman,
Yeah.
and then later the Superman versus King Kong
Yup,
episode.
yup. Yeah, we can get into those. I was surprised, like, that ape was throwing him around.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, like with Godzilla, like, okay, yeah, I could see that would take. I think it took him less effort to take down Godzilla than it did that giant ape.
Yeah,
That
I
ape
know.
kicked the crap out of Clark. It was like, he's got, like, I'm like, bro, you can fly. Like, he's like getting pulled down off the ladder, and I'm like, okay, like, sure. Like, I just watched Clark take a train and like pick it up, but like this ape can pull him down. But anyway, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think it was more just them doing different storylines and
Yeah.
trying to get kids more involved. Like, not more involved, more entertained by the episode. Because some of the stuff, like you said, like you think you're like, now I think
Inconsistent.
now, right?
Physics are broken. Immediately bad. Like,
I
no.
think nowadays, because what that started and what the trend is now we look at stuff, it's like, oh well, they're not consistent with that. Why?
Yeah.
They were still at the time
Yeah.
they were just like making it like just a theme. You got a character, enjoy the ride instead of like a
For
story. Because there was some stuff like you got that was wild, like the one with the laser beam with the scientist, and he had the it wasn't a falcon, but he had the bird.
Yep.
As his assistant.
That was very funny.
They open the door to get Lois. He pulls in Lois. They shut the door, and it just shows the bird doing the bottom lock and then leaving.
Yeah.
I was like, well,
I thought that was funny.
No one locked the top lock because he grabbed Lois. So I was like, that's definitely not going to stop Superman. But then he knows who Superman is. So I'm like, if he's a mad scientist with a laser beam, like, wouldn't he know that kryptonite's a guy I'm going to in this cartoon?
Yeah, kryptonite is another part because there were a lot of things in this that like kind of held him down, suppressed Superman's powers in a way, not like completely, but like different wires and electricity and different things were able to kind of hold him back, and also tear gas.
Yeah,
That was funny too.
They
They threw a box of tear gas at him, and he's like, oh, but then they just peppering him with bullets, and like he's fine.
I know. Yeah, like when that moment
Again,
happened with the tear gas, I was like, really, tear gas can bring
like,
Superman to his knees? So I was like,
no.
I was like, well, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you have a character like Superman, people are always going to look at things like that, right? Like, you kind of can't not be like, oh, really? You just got taken down by tear gas. But, like, that's the thing. I don't really care about, like, plot inconsistencies or things like that. Like, oh, he's strong enough to do this, but he can't do this. It's like, whatever. Like, maybe he was having a bad day when he was fighting that ape, you know? Like, Lois was on his butt, and he was like, geez, like, I'm not, you know, he wasn't into it today. But I have to make mention that in the first episode, when they're going over his origin, they show I thought it was funny how they blew up Krypton. Like, it looked like a basketball. They like overinflated and they're just gone. And of course they mentioned that like Jor-El, his father, was Krypton's best scientist and foresaw the destruction of the planet and sent him off in Earth's direction. Very convenient very ironic. Convenient and ironic because 60% of the villains in this probably are scientists. So like every scientist on Earth hates Superman, but the one on Krypton, thankfully, helped him live. But yeah, there are a lot of moments of Superman like fighting a beam of light or like something that isn't, you know, like a person or a living entity. And you see, like he tanks a lot of I couldn't really think of a word, but like the problems, the situation. Like he just tanks all the power of it, and like when he goes up against the beam of light and just literally and the magnet telescope and these different things. But then when it came to the volcano, he couldn't tank that. He had to because he couldn't just, you know, like plug up the volcano. Oh, we're good now, like obviously. So he had to figure out something else there. But I find it interesting. Like I think it kind of leads back into what I said earlier about Lois kind of being like the brains, even though like she made some foolish mistakes. But like Superman is just pretty much going in and just like like here's the problem. Let me Superman this, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, like I did laugh pretty hard in the first episode when he was with like that super laser. He was literally just like punching his way up the laser.
Up through the laser. Yeah.
Like I was like, oh, I guess he can beat a laser by just punching it into submission.
Love that. Also, sorry, the last thing about the origin was that they mentioned that when he landed on Earth, he was found by a cyclist? Was that what they said? And that he was then sent to an orphanage.
Yeah, that threw me off too, because I was like, really?
Sure.
Like
no Kent farm, even though his name in the show is Clark Kent, they're calling him Clark Kent. There's no reference of the Clark farm, the Kent farm, the Kent family, Pa Kent, any of them. Which immediately, actually, because I am my age, I'm not like, I just think of Clark's origin story like as that, So then when I thought of them, like I immediately thought of Flashpoint. If you guys know what Flashpoint is, it's like a classic, or not really classic, but like a fan favorite Flash comic where the DC universe like gets all jangled up, and Superman, instead of being found by the Kent family, is found by he lands in like the middle of Metropolis, and it's like it like kills people, and it's like a really bad thing, and I'm pretty sure Lex Luthor like imprisons him, and like they don't allow him to get out, and it's really messed up, and he ends up like, they find it when they pull him out of there, he's like totally deprived of the sunlight and like everything. It's terrible. But anyway, that just kind of reminded me of like, that's where my mind went as soon as I was like, no Pa Kent, no, Martha Kent, like, oh, like maybe, okay. It was just interesting to me, because you're so used to him being nurtured by them.
Yeah,
throughout history.
And I think when they made this series, it was more just like a one-off, or just kind of something to be entertaining, not so much add like a storyline. Because you had different villains. You didn't have like the Lex Luthor or another villain keep popping in and out.
Yeah, you had
kind of different villains, and there's no backstory in the villain. He was just this and that.
That kind of surprised me, like with the amount of mad scientists who showed up in this. I was also expecting one of them to be Lex Luthor, but he never ended up showing up. It was kind of only Superman, Lois, and then Perry. I'm pretty sure like the only comic book characters that actually appear in the series. Everyone else was just kind of like the mad scientist of the week.
No Jimmy Olsen in this. No. I was trying to think of that other character, but no Jimmy Olsen. He's in the other show. But yeah, I don't even think they mention him as Perry in this. I think he's just Chief or whatever,
Yeah, looking up on Wikipedia, he is listed as Perry, but I don't think they ever say the name in the Fleischer ones that we saw.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, dude. I enjoyed a lot of these episodes. Even though there was a lot of, I think that the downsides were like the maybe lack of creativity. Like, okay, another mad scientist, like, cool. Okay, like Lois gets captured again, cool. But it really is hammering home like a lot of the core concepts and like of Superman and putting it to screen, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. So we ended up seeing about half the series because Fleischer Studios kind of went bankrupt even through all this. The series was continued. Famous Studios, I believe, was the name for the rest. But these were all like sci-fi fantasy. Around then, it was 1942, and the cartoon started being more World War II propaganda. So, it's kind of where the dividing line is the episodes we saw, because, the next episode, it's Superman taking on the Japanese.
Yikes.
Yeah, so...
I'm sure that episode is aged wonderfully in terms of cultural depictions.
Yeah. I much prefer Superman crushes the Klan, but that's just me.
Yeah, so if we ever jump back in, we could analyze those, but it's sort of like two different series with the same, characters and voices, which, speaking of two different series with the same characters, Adventures of Superman, the 1950s, we have a public service announcement produced episode, again from the U.S. Treasury, for those who saw the Mr. Ed episode from the Treasury. How would you compare the big budget cartoon to the 1950s show?
Without the CG or the animation, it's just some guy in a costume running around. It's a lot more awkward. Superman him just like
Yeah.
jumping in the window and running over to the guy. I was like,
Yeah.
this just looks like this is just some guy in a costume running around.
He has no
Yeah.
powers.
The cartoons definitely felt big and epic. This felt kind of cheap.
Yeah,
I did think. Let me say this. I'll compare it to the Mr. Ed episode. I think that it was less dependent upon, like they provided this episode to the Treasury. I'm pretty sure it's that. And I don't know, Mr. Ed may have as well, but this felt like it wasn't. The plot wasn't like truly depending upon it. It was like there was a jewelry thief, and then like a couple of by the end it's like, oh, like actually the Jimmy Olsen saving money actually ended up like helping them in the end, stuff like that. But I think overall like it was less propaganda-y than the Mr. Ed, because Mr. Ed was literally telling you to get the savings bonds like beginning, middle, and end of the episode.
yeah. I still kind of found the moments where they inserted the like propaganda to be kind of a bit eye rolling, because like
Oh, for sure, at the very
because
end.
the beginning when like there's the two criminals rob the bank and the one kind of freezes up and Superman confronts him. The guy's like, "Oh, I wish I learned how to save money at a young age.
Yeah,
I
I know,
wouldn't
right?
have to do
That was
this."
funny.
Like I was just like, okay, I see what you're doing there. I'm
I
like,
thought that was funny, but I also, for some reason, just in my head, I imagine like, oh, like there is this element of like super like criminals like kind of like just giving up to Superman and being like, oh, like I should have been better. You know what I mean? So I thought that did kind of play into that, but I wasn't really sure where that element came from. Maybe like the Chris Reeve or like something. But so I just thought like that was pretty funny. But yes, pretty goofy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the one like kind of action scene, him going through the wall. You just,
That was
you
awesome.
just kind of see like
That
the
was
top
awesome.
of the wallpaper just like stretch and
Very
like
good.
break apart.
Yeah, that was awesome. I
It's
love
like,
that.
That wall's not given too well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, this show I'm a lot less familiar with. Definitely didn't see anything prior to this. But yeah, it definitely had a charm to it in spite of, it's being used to sell savings bonds to kids.
That's right. I thought George Reeves played Clark pretty well for the circumstances. I mean, I'm pretty sure that he, you could get into his thoughts on like the role and everything. But he didn't think it was really for adults and stuff. But like, I thought that his Clark performance in that was like pretty good. Him talking to Lois and him doing all the journalist stuff. I thought overall like it was pretty strong. It's just like when he's Superman, he's just a guy in a suit. Doesn't look that good.
I did like the character of Lois better in this one special than I did in the other ones, in the animated ones. Because in the animated ones, she kind of seemed, as you said, she was kind of a bit more of like a plot device to drive Superman to come and get and solve the issue. Here we saw a lot more for her like a bantering with other characters.
Yeah, like,
she kind of got to show a bit more personality other than just there's a story, I have to go get it. We kind of saw a bit more personality out of her in this, which I kind of liked.
Yeah, but it was also like she was like, "Oh no, I'm doing it this way. We're going this way. You know what? I'm gonna go get the person for you. I'm gonna be the cop and arrest the person."
Yeah, that was when I thought that Lois was being
I'm like, all right, you're being a little too aggressive.
like Blinky. She gets a call. Hey, it's Blinky. Oh, Blinky, like, back from the day. No, not that Blinky. Different Blinky. How is there a different Blinky? But also, like, the fact that he's like, I'm going to surrender to you, Miss Lane. Like, you're going to surrender to a journalist? Like, come on, man. This is untrue. So obviously, like, come on, Lois. Like, you're a smart, like, investigator. You're a journalist here. Like, there's the phone recording. Just give it to the police. Like, she called Perry or the chief and was like, I got a story. I got a surprise or something, and like hung up. She didn't like tell her where she was going or like any of those things. So at that point I was like, geez. But yes, more personality. She was definitely playing into like the like stealing, like not stealing, but borrowing Jimmy's typewriter and like, oh, Clark, I'm shopping is an art form, things like that. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I did also kind of like more that in the live action Avengers Superman, we actually like Lois actually kind of shows some self awareness. So she's like, "How do I always end up in the
Yeah, right.
like with the
She's
person?"
like, clearly, I'm not that
Yeah,
smart.
yeah, Blinky was like, "You're a smart woman, Miss Lane." She's like, "Clearly, I'm not. I always seem to keep ending up in these situations."
Yeah.
This is the animated one. I don't think learned a single lesson
No shot.
of
No.
like, "Hey, how many times can I walk up to a mad scientist and expect not to get kidnapped?"
Truth. That's true.
And even with the action, so I'm trying to think. Like there wasn't that much. It was more just him, like jumping around. A lot of it is they just didn't really have not only the technology, but like the cinematic kind of idea of how to shoot this to look like he's flying or anything else. I don't think it was until like Adam West's like Batman that they tried to like do different things like, oh, let's climb up the building. All right. So to climb up the building, we'll shoot the camera
like
sideways, and you go forward. Like they just didn't do those camera tricks.
Yep, for sure. They were trying to do different things in the Adam West like that. I can see in this they were being more grounded in like very simple camera angles with Superman. They're shooting him very like nonchalantly. It makes him feel not epic at all. It makes him just feel like a guy. And that's like the shots of Clark and the shots of Superman don't feel any different. It's the same shot of Clark running away that it was of Superman running in that first one. So of Superman, when so you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I totally agree.
Like crushing the gun, they just show his hands around the gun and he throws the gun. So you get the idea that he crushed it in a ball, but really he just put his hands around it, did his shoulders, and threw the gun away so you didn't see it.
The VFX of the 1950s.
Yeah. Speaking of comparisons between this and the animated version, I was surprised by how the opening to Adventures of Superman was pretty much the exact same opening of the Fleischer like cartoons. It had like the same opening narration of like faster than a speeding bullet, and then the up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane. It's pretty much the beat for beat the exact same opening, even like with him standing triumphantly with the Superman costume transitioning into him as Clark Kent.
Right.
Yeah.
It was kind of the same exact opening.
It was extremely similar.
With one difference. The only thing really added was making it truth, justice, and the American way at that point.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a fun one.
I'm fairly certain the Superman shorts we saw were pre-Pearl Harbor. I think they came out
mention
after.
of American Way in those. No.
Yeah, and also in 1951, like 50s, and like the Cold War started by then, so probably a bit of that as well.
Oh yeah, fair point. It's the era of McCarthyism, so.
Yeah, they definitely turned him into a symbol once they realized that he was like, popular and like people, like kids looked up to him, kids liked the character, kids will listen to him, and those are the people that, they're trying to teach a lesson. So
and Superman was the only animated. Like there were other comic book characters already in the public eye, but Superman was the only cartoon. Right. It was in different media, so I think that's why they really grabbed on him to like get kids where the army was.
I'm trying to think what else like after this, what was like the next animated,
animated?
Like I know that there was a pretty early X-Men series.
No, that was the 1990s
or 2000s. I mean, I just don't know what was in like what were they putting out for animated superhero stuff in the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah, there were some cheap cartoons of the 60s, like
maybe Fantastic Four.
Yeah, the Spider-Man, which most people know as the pointing.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Was that more 70s or 80s? Was that 60s? I don't know. Like
I thought it was like late 60s, but
yeah,
you definitely got like the Super Friends era of the 70s.
Right.
That's what I was just about to say. I was like, when did that show come out? Like,
I know that was big.
Twins?
That was definitely big. My parents talked about watching that. My dad did. As a wee lad.
Yeah, there was like definitely different. I think they tried other characters because you had the Super Friends with like the Wonder Twins, and then you kind of had like different variation. That's when he started seeing like the variations of a DC character and a Marvel character, and you're like, wait, that character's just like that, but it's more like that character. So just copy
when they started like doing very similar
crisscrossing.
Yeah, what is it with like you got like Aquaman and Namor. You got there's a lot. I mean, Superman is like so iconic, and like I don't know if he has like a true Marvel equivalent. I think it's hard to. I mean, maybe, but like it's really hard to pick one out.
Probably the closest, maybe Thor.
He does well.
Yeah, I don't know. I personally I would go with like a Captain Marvel or a Vision as the closest, but or maybe even somebody that's a little more like obscure.
Yeah, well, to be fair,
or Adam Warlock. But.
He kind of does have pretty generic superpowers like super strength and flying and
the laser eyes.
Laser
well,
vision.
there is the cold breath, which I think no one else really has that. I mean, that I'm thinking of, like, you know, that's pretty unique, I would say. But then I know I feel you, the flying and the super strength, and he has super speed as well. When you look at like, I think Vision probably the closest, but totally when you look at the other superheroes, you know, a lot of them have very close comparisons on the Marvel and DC sides, because they were being created at the same time by people who were like best friends.
Yeah,
you know, and just working for different companies.
That does bring up an interesting point. Because definitely going back to my childhood, like some of those older cartoons that came out after the 40s Superman just really seemed kind of cheap and low budget compared to it. Like the first time it felt like kind of big were some of the ones I grew up with, like the X-Men of the 90s, the Spider-Man of the 90s, like those. It was definitely a different animation style, but it definitely felt less cheap than a lot of those other ones we're talking about.
Yeah, so I think that what might go into that is partially the element of like they knew they were doing however many shorts. Maybe they they got signed on for like a certain amount more after 9. Like I know that there was a bit of a shift after that 9th episode, like you said. But so were they commissioned to do 18 and that's it, or was there like 9 and then or like, because there's 17 or 18, right?
I believe 17. Yeah.
So I'm assuming it's kind of a random number that they were probably commissioned to do all of those at once, and then there was never anything for a season 2, season 3, or whatever. That wasn't a concept for them. So like when you think about these other shows, the Spider-Mans of the world and whatever it is, like they're like, oh, like we want a season 2. We're thinking ahead. So like, how are we gonna like budget this? You know, like instead of where in the Superman cartoons, it's like all like we're putting all of our money into these, you know, like we said, like how many dollars per second, a lot. So I think it goes into it.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's definitely felt there, like especially when you compare it to like 10 years later, the live action just it didn't work as well.
It's just not, in my opinion, not as strong of an adaptation like of the character, and that goes to show that, like, I mean, there are parts of the live action that we really enjoy, like the more characters and like more, like you said, more personality from Lois, and like I like Clark Kent in that one, where I think in the animated Clark Kent is kind of just like ha ha ha, like, you know, looks into the camera, they don't know yet kind of thing, and like, oh, this is a job for Superman, and he really doesn't say anything else than that. But in the live action, like he was really on his journalist stuff, you know. So I think that even in that vein, I think that the animated did a good job of just like, you know, showing the character. It was a good adaptation. I enjoyed it, even if, like you said as well, like maybe it's not the super deep plot lines. It's not Lex Luthor. It's not these things. Still did a good job of portraying Superman.
Yeah. And also probably something that the live action version had over the anime version is that it was longer.
True.
Because I think I saw off to the side when I was watching the Adventures of Superman episode, there was like another one of those called Superman versus the Mole People, and it was like almost an hour long. So I think those ones would be a lot longer, where all the Fleischer cartoons were like under 10 minutes, I believe. So they kind of had to speak. They kind of had to tell a lot in a short amount of time, versus in the live action version they kind of got to tell and show more.
Oh yeah, the pacing is definitely a lot more breakneck, because like you only have 8 minutes and 2 of them are reserved to okay, here's the origin story.
Yep, intro, and then
Yeah, and they made these shorts to go because Paramount Pictures was it to go in front of the movies. So they were just like extended trailers to go in front of whatever movies because they would show like something like this for the kids, a little news clip thing for the adults in the theaters, and then they would do the movie, and that's how people got like their information for when they went to the movie theaters.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so these shorts had to be short because they played for movies.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't supposed to be like, what was it, like Olaf's Frozen Adventure, the Frozen short that was like close to 30 minutes long that they played before Coco.
Yeah.
And people were really upset about that because they were like, I paid to see one movie and I got forced to watch another movie.
Yeah,
where like
30 minutes, man.
Where like these shorts were like over and done in like 8 minutes and then
in and out.
And then the main event.
Yeah, because back then also like you didn't have movie trailers, like they didn't make movie trailers, so this was like replacing it to give enough time to people really to like get what they need at concession stands, or if they're running to get there so they're not late to the movie, so they gotta give that grace period so they can still make it in to see the theater, to see the picture. I mean,
that grace period nowadays, man, is, I know it's off topic, but it is so long.
Oh yeah. Now
I've been going to the theaters a little bit this year, and like you have like a 2:30 showtime, like it's probably like 3:10 by the time that thing gets going, at least at AMC, because you get all these trailers, and then they give you the like, please turn off your phone and butter up that popcorn, baby, because it's time for the movie, and then it goes to black, and then you're like, all right, it's time. And then Nicole Kidman comes out and tells you how you should go to the movies while you're sitting there at the movies, ready to watch a movie. And I just have to mention that was the funniest thing when who mentioned it at the Oscars? It was Jimmy Kimmel mentioned it at the Oscars, and she like realized like in the moment they cut to her and she like is laughing, but then she's like, oh my god, they totally do that. Like they're playing that right before the movie starts. Like for people that are already at the movies, it's crazy. But yeah, definitely.
But I don't know. I haven't been to AMC because there's not too many now around. But like I like going to Regal. It's almost like they'll do like
because they sell food, right? Or no?
No, some of the areas sell food, but they'll do like questions, like so you
trivia.
Don't get the trivia.
Yeah, I've seen that too. It's like, dude, what are we doing?
And then they'll start almost like doing commercials, like what was it? Don't videotape the theater.
Yeah,
like,
I saw that too. One of the times they have that, and then I saw like genuinely just like ads, commercials for brands that are set for the movie theater. Like they were only going to be played in there. Very interesting. Very weird. But like, I don't know. Just the conversation of Superman just turned over to that, which I think is funny.
No,
but like,
it's fascinating.
It happens.
He's got a big presence in film, so like it
but how
sense.
these like first these little cartoons was like to go before movies. And
so
now
what kind of movies do you know? Like what kinds of movies they would play before? Like
I don't know, like any of the movies that you'd see like during
in the 50s.
Yeah, because
that's cool.
I don't know when they started doing trailers.
Yeah, it used to be like just a big event. Like here's a whole bunch of stuff, like a precursor to television, I would say.
Yeah,
gotcha. Yeah.
You don't really have that, like say for Pixar, like okay, we're gonna do a 5-minute short behind it, but that's pretty much the only one I can think of that regularly does anything bonus beyond here's the movie.
Yeah.
After you get through all those trailers and Nicole Kidman, as you said.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think. Like I think like movie trailers didn't start really coming out until the 70s, maybe even late 70s.
Yeah, because probably like TV wasn't as big. Well, yeah, there was no TV in the 40s. I think it was just radio.
Yeah,
was it?
yeah.
And speaking of radio,
50s.
actually, like the two voice actors for the Fleischer cartoons who voiced Superman and Lois Lane would later go on to voice the characters in a radio show.
Really?
That also ended up being called The Adventures of Superman.
Cool. That's funny. They got him back. They had some good voices for it, I thought.
Yeah, and usually like with the radio, they'll keep the characters. Like when we did Dragnet, it started off on the radio, and they brought the people from that did
it was
radio,
reversed.
brought it to the TV series.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, I think that like overall, to see, because those comics, the comics of that time, were very like they're very different from like you see how the evolution of Superman comics changed over like during the inception. It happened with Batman too. There's like eras of what these characters are like kind of doing. Like there was a time where like Batman did start out dark. I know we're going to Batman now, but like, he started out pretty dark, and then like Adam West came around, and people kind of got used to that vibe of like him being kind of goofy, and so they kind of morphed it to that in the comics, and then like find ways to like they kind of got out of that era too. But you see it with Superman as well, like different eras and how the shows can impact how the character stands forever. Like, you know, like if he didn't fly, like, are we even sitting here talking about him today? Like, I don't know.
But even with comics now, like there's not comics, animated series.
Yeah.
Like some people want like the animated series to be made live action because the animated series kind of took it from the comics to tell a story.
100%. Yeah.
So it's more, so the people want that like storyline that they can get from it.
I think you saw that with X-Men. Like, I mean, in that series was the 90s, I think, and then you get those movies in the early 2000s, and like. People definitely like those movies. People really like that animated series. And now that animated series is coming back. So, and the X-Men are coming back in live action. So you see it all comes around eventually. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's also kind of interesting. It's also kind of pretty timely that we're talking about these cartoons and Superman right now, because like in just like the last few weeks, like a new Superman was casted,
That's
and
right.
a new Superman animated show.
And a new Lois.
Yeah, and a new Superman animated show just came out on what was once called HBO Max, but is now called Max.
Strictly Max dropped the HBO.
Yeah.
I saw that. I haven't seen the animated series yet, and I also heard about the castings, and I think they'll be great.
And I think they'll do more animated series because it's tough with live action because you'll get an actor for a role, and you really can't get that actor to keep going movie after movie, looking the same, keep it portraying. So why animated series, they're drawn the same way. So you can have more of a story arc and longer time span, and you don't have to worry about your character aging and not looking right, and then recasting, looking different, acting different. It's all going to constantly act the same.
Someone should have told Joss Whedon.
And also just animation wise, like the superhero, like there's always definitely like say like a difference between like an action scene in animation than like an action scene in live action, where just like how fluid movement can be in animation versus like it can be a little more awkward in live action, which we kind of see with the George Reeves Superman, and also and like sort of on topic, but like all these live action Disney remakes that keep coming out always kind of ended up being a bit more awkward than like how they did in the animated version.
Because they're trying to like recapture that like magic, you know what I mean? I think. But I was going to mention about like live action Superman, you know, what was it? Like the Chris Reeves ones, you know, are iconic movies and stuff, but like the action is very of its time. It's like what, the 70s, and there was 4 movies. There was the 70s and 80s, or just the 70s.
I think it did go into the 80s.
I think the last couple ones like beginning 80s.
And so like the action is solid, you know. It's like it is what kind of you would expect. And then Superman Returns, was that the name of it, or with the one with Brandon Routh?
Yeah, that was supposed to be a sequel to Superman 2, undoing episodes 3 and 4.
Yeah, that one wasn't it for me personally. I mean, like visually, like I felt like it was like not really up to snuff with like a lot of the other movies that were coming out at the same time, and like I think they were taking more. Like the plane scene is pretty good. But like they're taking more. They're trying to do more, you know, like visually with the character, but it's like hard because. I mean, I don't know if you've heard this, but he never throws a punch in that movie.
Yeah, I just remember being really bored by that movie.
Yeah, it's like like bro needs to throw a punch. Like we need to get this going. Like,
the only thing I liked about that one is his version of Clark Kent was more a total opposite of Superman. So it wasn't like one of those things that you look at. It's like,
Like this dude is obviously.
I was
Clark
like, yeah,
Kent. He's
no.
obviously Superman.
The only difference is he's wearing glasses.
Yeah, yeah.
Like his personality, he was like clumsy and flustered as Clark Kent. But
I think he was
Superman-
totally playing into that Chris Reeves, right? That
Yeah.
Chris Reeves version. I mean,
Right.
it was a legitimate sequel. Like they were touting it as though Brandon Routh was the same. It's the same universe, same iteration. So I think that for what they were trying to do, like I think that it succeeds upon that. But it's like at the same time, I haven't seen the movie in a while, so I don't want to talk too much about that one.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, kind of fun fact you mentioned Superman Returns. I believe the actress who plays Lois in the Adventures of Superman show has a cameo in.
Really? Cool.
in that.
Cool. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
And we can actually draw that back to the cartoon. The second era of the shorts actually had a scene that of him stopping a plane from crashing, like the Superman Returns scene that you had mentioned. It was like a direct homage to that.
Yep.
Yeah,
we have no service here, so I can't check the internet and make sure that I'm right. But I'm like 90% sure. You can cut this out if it's not true. But that in Zack Snyder's Justice League, the cop who is at the Superman Memorial is actually the original Jimmy Olsen actor from this show. Might not be true, but I'm pretty sure. Unless it's the Jimmy Olsen from the Superman movie. But I'm pretty sure it's from the Adventures of Superman. He just plays a cop, but it's cool character.
Oh yeah, it's kind of fascinating
cameo.
how these two adaptations have had such an impact on something that's still going till today. Like, even beyond the things we talked about, the CW still has a Superman show that they just renewed for another season.
Yeah, Superman Lois is really, really popular.
Yeah,
really popular show.
The second one, because they had Smallville before that too.
Yep. Lois and Clark, and now they're doing Superman and Lois, and that'll probably keep going for a little bit.
I think
that'll probably outlast every other CW show.
Was it also like I'm just a Superboy CW show? Or am I wrong?
I don't think
was that the Smallville? Was it Superboy or
no? There was
one about a young Superman. I think that wasn't Smallville.
Yeah, I don't know if it was on the CW.
I don't know. Like there's just so many CW shows. That
I know.
Came out that I
know.
just lost
It's crazy.
track of which one was which.
Yeah, there's so many.
But with DC is probably the one that allows and that's what kind of makes like the not oversaturated, but you get so many different versions of characters and really know what's the right direction, because I feel like DC really let their characters get taken and adapt for different things.
They allow for like experimentation, exploration of these characters, where instead of like, there's one Iron Man like that everyone knows for 15 years.
And now it's like that because Disney,
which I think is fine.
Stan Lee really held it down. Like he kept it close. Like he wanted to be involved with the progression of it too. So I think that's another thing that like the writers and creators of DC never really had the chance. They might have not had the chance. They never really went the progression like Stan Lee did to make the characters stay form.
I will say, I will contest slightly, even though I do agree for the most part. Like, I think that for the films, like I think they tried with Chris Reeve. They gave him 4 movies. He was going to do a 5th. And obviously, what happened with him happened. The horse incident, but then you look at, and this is just movies, right? But like, I mean, if you look at Marvel on the other end, like by the time that the Avengers were going, there had been three live action Spider-Man already.
Yeah, and so I think that that's the beginning between the Spider-Man and the first one with Chris Evans. I mean, as
Captain America.
No, the Fantastic Four.
Sorry. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
so,
good.
Like the anime, the CG did get a bit funky, but the character itself was still like they still had a good storyline and a good progression towards that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And personally, I mean, I like when characters can have different adaptations and versions. Like I think that they, I mean, these aren't my words, but like, it's almost like a mythology. Like it's like these characters have been around for so long that it's like, why not like see like what does this person see it as? What does this person see it as? Where like I'm fine with like the way like I think that Spider-Man has had a long ride. I know Marvel is just seen as the more like they've had way less reboots, you know, when it comes to their literal comics, when it comes to their movies, when it comes to like their shows, everything is much like they've had the same ongoing timeline in their comics since the beginning, while DC has rebooted theirs with Flashpoint, New 52, or they might have been combined, but many different occasions. Crisis on Infinite Earths, many different instances where they rebooted their universe and then like said, oh, this actually is not good, like with the New 52, and they just went back and like, oh, like forget that even happened, guys, like our bad on that. Like that happens with DC like quite a bit.
And even like right
people
now,
can't fans a lot of the time can't come to an agreement on what works with these characters. I think that is one of the things that like kind of holds DC back, where like there is no one version of Batman that works, one version of Superman that works. Like I think that there probably is one out there, but there are many versions that work. I think for I don't know if there's one out there that would just work for everybody.
Did you ever watch the Superman the animated series that came out?
What's his name?
Hannibal?
Yeah, I've seen episodes though.
Yeah, that and also the one Batman.
And the Batman. I've seen more of that. Yep.
Those
Superman.
A lot of people I know kind of like refer to those two adaptations as like the
most beloved.
As kind of the gold standard Superman and Batman adaptations, and I read like both those shows actually took a lot of inspiration from the Fleischer cartoons.
Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
I would believe it. They were huge staples. I mean, those two animated series were absolutely massive. Batman might have been even bigger, to be honest. I'm not sure, but like, and then Justice League came around, and it was massive as well. So that was what in the 2000s, 2010s,
late 90s.
Okay,
yeah, somewhere that ballpark.
Probably not 2010s, but like 90s and 1000s.
Because Fox picked up the Batman one, so Fox was a big thing.
Yeah, early 90s, it was definitely the Batman show, the X-Men show, and Spider-Man all on Fox, all big hits.
That's why I'm like, I don't totally remember the Superman one. Probably if I see an episode, I'm like, oh, yeah, I watch it, like off the top of my head. But like now with like how you said how
if you saw like him, like that version of it, you'd be like, oh yeah, I know this guy totally. But he'll be flashing on screen now.
Yeah. When he said this, so like DC just revamping things. So when they do like a live action movie, you're like, all right, where are they getting the storyline? And people just think of one continuous storyline and not really like they're taking the script adaptation
starting from scratch, or
this comic series, not this Batman comic series.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think that it can be confusing for some, you know,
because like to have Tim Burton one Batman is different from the Christopher Nolan's Batman.
Of course, yeah.
That was two different comic series.
Yeah, and same with the new the Matt Reeves, Batman v Superman, all of them. They're all different universes, and I think that's okay because like Batman is a character. I think even more so than Superman, Batman is one that like lends himself to a lot of different interpretation.
Yep.
I think that like the DC characters, I think all of them do. I think DC is just that's the history that we've gotten is many different iterations. So like that's just how we see it. And like I mean there are ones that people love and ones that people don't. And I'm sure there will be ones in the future that like I mean for example, I'm not like there are some movies of James Gunn's that I do enjoy. But I don't know if I'm going to absolutely adore the 2024 Superman Legacy movie. I mean, I will give it a go. I will give it everything I have. But his movies just tend to like, some of the humor doesn't hit for me sometimes. So it's like, there's elements like that. And then like, I like Superman movies that most people don't. So it's like, there are elements of that where it'll always be like that. But I think that's okay because it allows for these kinds of conversations.
Right. And us to get off topic.
We are almost out of time.
Off topic. I think we were there.
No, on topic.
Yeah. So, final thoughts. Would you recommend these shorts?
Yes.
Yeah, I would, especially to anyone who hasn't seen them but is a fan of Superman. You like especially seeing like the early days of Superman adaptations. This is a good like start.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. I would
tenfold.
All right. Well, I think that does it for this Radiocast. We will see you next time.
Alrighty.
All right. Thanks.